Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today to our Tableau for Retail Insights webinar. Today we'll be going through how you can get a broader understanding of your business and overcome challenges using data, whether that's in product inventory, customer experience, or using promotional strategies. Ultimately, we want you to make sure that you have a unified view of your information so you're able to build that competitive advantage, whatever your industry may be. And so when we were brainstorming events that we could put on for our clients, Tableau for Retail was at the top of our list because everyone in the industry is now facing new challenges due to COVID, and visibility into your data is absolutely key with new factors to consider, like changing market forecasts and evolving online customer requirements, and specifically how to safely reopen and stay open while maintaining that quality service. So retailers and wholesalers are more now than ever turning to data to stay ahead of that curve and find new strategies to quickly pivot as that new information becomes available. So next slide. So my name is Jen McNaughton. I'm an account manager at Newcomp Analytics, and I'll just be kicking things off, and then I'll pass it over to Jason, who's an analytics consultant at Newcomp, and he'll be going through our demo today. And at the end of the webinar, I'll just highlight some of the upcoming formal Tableau training that we do have available for those of you who are interested. And next slide. So as a brief overview of Newcomp Analytics, we're an end-to-end analytics provider. We do software licensing, implementation services, strategic consulting and mentoring, and then training for all aspects of analytics. So anything from analytic strategy to data warehouse development and cloud architecture, data engineering, as well as business intelligence and data science, which is sort of our focus for today. And we're one of Canada's first Tableau business partners, and we're now a gold Tableau partner and been in the industry for over 25 years. We work very closely with Tableau to guide our clients as their trusted analytics advisors. So next slide, and with that, I will hand it off to Jason to jump into the content.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. I am the consultant today that will be guiding you guys through this demo. We've had a lot of clients recently start to talk to us about how they can sort of display their data based off of an event and see how that event basically has affected their business. No surprise here, the event that I'm speaking of has been the pandemic. So today I have a simplified version of a retailer facing the pandemic and facing that event, and I'm going to show you how to graph that in Tableau and create a beautiful report in Tableau. So to hop into this report, I'm just going to show you the finished product so you guys will sort of get an idea of what we're going to do today. Basically, the title of this report is How Did Implementing an Online Store Affect Business in the Pandemic? So let's imagine we have a business that had no retail presence online whatsoever, and then they decided to add that retail online presence at a certain time. How did that affect their business? And more specifically, how did that affect their revenue? So as we go down here, we're going to add a bit of context by talking about the March 17th Ontario emergency order that hit the store's sales really badly because people didn't want to go into the store. And then we're going to look that after April 5th, which is when the store launched their online retail presence, we're going to look on how that affected their sales afterwards. So with this dashboard, what's nice about it is we have a line chart of the sales that are being used, the sales that have appeared throughout 2020. And we also have these nice nifty orange arrows and boxes that add context and narrative so that any data analyst that is building out this report is able to clearly communicate it to their executives to tell them a story. Really something important today that I want to talk about is how to build that story, how to build that narrative around your data based off an event. Okay, so one feature of this dashboard that we have here is we have some relative text at the top here. So you can see the total sales here is $1.6 million with $190,000 in profit between January 2nd and today. So one thing about we have with this dashboard is if we have a user who selects different points on our line chart, these numbers are actually going to change. So I'm going to show you guys how to make these numbers relative to what you selected on your dashboard. And then also at the bottom of this dashboard, we then have a second analysis that sort of ties into that line chart. We have the in-store sales versus the online sales before March 17th and after March 17th. So really before that emergency order was put in place, what our sales look like before and after. We can see that we have our internet sales in blue here that have actually taken up a large portion of our business after March 17th, which should give us a bit of an indication that yes, implementing that online store for our retailer did pay out dividends, and we should continue that practice. We should definitely not close our retail store. All right, so there's a lot that goes into this dashboard, and as we go through this presentation, the three things that I'd like for you guys to take from this presentation is how easy it is to build these visualizations in Tableau. You'll see when I do this line chart, it basically takes 30 seconds to build. I also want you to think about how important it is to build a narrative within your report. So this report will read from top to bottom, and that's something that is very intentional. It's to guide our readers. And then finally, the importance of proper planning and formatting within your dashboard itself. So I'm going to show you a bit of planning, actually, how I would go ahead and plan this dashboard, plan the skeleton of this dashboard before I actually go in to make it. And then I'm going to show you how to add these borders and these formatting to all of our Tableau objects. All right, so to start out, what I like to do for planning is I like to go to a website called draw.io. So if you just Google draw.io or you put that directly into your URL, you'll get a page that looks like this. This is one of my favorite websites for planning out my dashboards. You have your shapes on the side here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start and we're going to create some containers to which we're going to add our Tableau objects. So my containers are right here. I'm going to add this container. And then I'm going to add a Tableau dashboard object inside this container. And I'm going to call this one title. So we need to start everything off with a title. So we have our title. I'll make this a little bigger so you guys can see it. We have our title. Then we are going to have some text, so context text. Then the next item we're going to have in our dashboard is the relative text. Okay, so that's going to be our first container that we're going to have in our dashboard. Now the second container is going to look a lot like this. So I'm going to copy and paste this down. And this is going to be a blank Tableau object. This is going to be my line chart, followed by another blank Tableau object. And then finally, the last container of our report is going to be those two pie charts. So this one is going to include the in-store title, so in-store versus online. And then we're going to have a sub-container within that container that is going to have two pie charts. So pie chart 1 and pie chart 2. Okay, so I've essentially built out the skeleton for what we're going to have in our dashboard. If we go back to the dashboard, we can see at a high level, this is what we're going to create. We have our first container right here. We have the second container containing with our line chart here. And then our last one with our pies is right here. Okay, so once you're happy with the skeleton, and believe me, the skeleton will vary as you go. You might have to add or subtract from it. That's a normal part of the process. Because we're happy with this skeleton though, we can copy paste it now. We can put it to the side here. Now we can actually fill in this skeleton with what we'd like to insert into our dashboard objects. So I'm going to copy paste this in because I want to save time. We only have an hour today. But really it's really just as simple as writing in the text. So we have first our title, and then we're going to have our context text. So this context text needs to be a little bigger of a box. Going to save this into this context text, and then we're going to have the relative text. So what the relative text is going to be is actually just the sales. So we're going to say there was XXX sales. So XXX is just a placeholder for the variable of sales. XXX sales and XXX profit between our date 1 and our date 2. That's good for that object. And then our line chart, we don't have to put anything else here because the line chart is just going to be inserted from Tableau. And then for our bottom pie charts, I would just add that maybe we can change the titles to be pie chart before March 17th and then pie chart after March 17th, just so that we are very clear on what is going on. Okay, awesome. Now that we have our skeleton, we can start to jump into Tableau and build out our first visualization. The first visualization we're going to look at is how to build that line chart. So I'm going to open up Tableau here. And for the first thing we're going to look at is our data source. So by clicking on this data source tab here, you'll get a view of what the data source actually looks like. This is a very familiar view to a lot of you who might have used Excel or a SQL table in the past. Take a second to load here. Perfect. So the important fields that I want you guys to sort of get a look at is we have an order date field, which is just coming in as dates. We have a sales field, which is coming in as thousands of dollars. We have profit, and then we have a few other fields as well, such as sales method, which can either be in-store or online. So just keep in mind, this is a relational database structure, so every row will represent a purchase in our store. Okay, so if we want to create a line chart that will show the sales of our store, it's really easy. All we need to do is add an order date to our columns. We're going to change it to be, instead of year, we're going to change it to be a day. And then we're going to add sales to our rows. And just like that, and I think like 2 clicks, we've created this line chart. This line chart is easy money. It's like Kevin Durant in the NBA. It was so easy to make. I love it. Shout out to all the NBA fans out there who have been watching the basketball playoffs. I've been watching it so much, but I won't mention the other Toronto team that kind of let me down a little bit this year, but that's okay because we still have the NBA. Go Raps. All right, now that we have that settled, I'm going to show you guys how to add the orange circles to this dashboard that will basically show us events, important events in our data set. So if I take my event dimension here on the side and I bring it to my label, we can see where exactly these events are appearing in Tableau. In this case, the event is appearing at the proper date, but not at the proper height, right? We have a sales peak event that appears to be in line with our sales peak on this side, but what we really need is we want these sales peak to basically line up directly on this dot. So to do that, we're going to use a created calculated field. So calculated field in Tableau, for people who have not seen Tableau before, this is like a custom calculation that you can add to Tableau. And we're going to call this display sales if event is not null. So if you saw in our data before, we had a lot of nulls under that event column, but there are specific days that actually have these messages next to them. So to get these to appear in our line chart at the proper way, we're going to introduce this calculated field that is as following. We're going to use an if statement. We're going to say not is null. We're going to say event, then sales, end. Okay, so don't worry too much about this syntax. It's not the goal of today. I just want to introduce to you calculated fields, but basically if you're interested, what this is saying is if this event field in our data is not null, then display the sales. Okay, if it's not null, then display the sales. And a lot of you who have seen this if syntax might say, oh, you're missing an else statement in this if function. But I don't want anything to happen if the event is null, and therefore I'm going to leave this else statement out of my field. Don't worry if that didn't mean anything to you. It's not super important. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, and we see this new field that we just created is now a part of our measures, and we're actually able to add this to our chart. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to bring it over to my axis at the far right here. When I do this, it's going to create a dual axis chart with both of my measures. So a dual axis chart is also known as a combo chart in the data visualization world. Basically, we now have both measures showing up in our data. So we can also change that new data point that we just created. We can change it to be circles, and we can synchronize the axis to which that circle relies on. And now you can see on our important event points, we now have these points that are showing up that are bigger and will attract people's eyes. So the last thing that I want to do is I want to change these to actually be orange instead of that teal. So I can do that by clicking on the legend and going to orange. And voila, we now have our line chart completed and ready for our final report. Okay, the next visualization that I want to show you guys how to do is those pie charts. So pie charts are super easy to do in Tableau as well. All you need is a dimension to which you want to split your pie on, and then the measure to measure the size of your pies. So we're going to split on the sales method. And then the measure we're going to use is sales. So I'm going to click on sales, and Tableau has a nifty button at the top right here that I would encourage you to sort of explore if you're new to Tableau. It's a show me button. This button has a bunch of different graph types that you're able to use and explore with. You'll see there's a pie chart option here. So I'm going to click on that pie chart option. And now what we can see is we actually have a pie chart that has been created automatically for us. Very easy to do. That's why I love Tableau. So with this, we have a pie chart. We have a legend at the top right here that says sales method in store is orange and blue is online. I like to add labels directly to my pie chart so people can see without looking at legends, they can actually see what is going on. And to do that, there's actually a label box here that we can just simply drag our dimensions to. So let's drag the sales method dimension to it. So we have online and in store. You can also drag the sum of sales. So we have our sum of sales of being almost $1 million for online and almost or 750K for in store. And then finally, we can also add a percentage to that label by changing the sales to be to use a quick table calculation of percent of total. So Tableau has a bunch of these nifty quick table calculations that allows you to show your data in whatever way you'd like. In this case, I think percent of total is a great way to show this off. So we now have 55% of our sales are online and 44% of our sales are in store. All right. Perfect. So these are supposed to be sales before March 17th. So what we can do is we can actually add a filter to this visualization to display only the sales before March 17th. And to do that, I'm going to click on my order date dimension, and I'm going to drag it to this filter box right here. So order date to filter box. And now we get a bunch of different filter options that appear. So there's a ton of options. The one that is appropriate for us today is this range of dates. So range of dates allows you to pick a specific date range. We're going to do from the start of our data to March 17th. We'll click OK. I did not choose March 17th there. I think I chose May 17th. Yep. Click OK. And here we go. Now we have our pie chart that's for all of our data before March 17th. Okay, so March 17th is, it would make sense that all of our data is coming in as in store. That is because we don't have any sales online yet because we haven't launched our online store. Now, if I want to look at this same pie chart, but for data that happened after March 17th, I can quickly duplicate this visualization, and I'll name it here, I'll name it after March 17th. And I can simply just change my filter and change the range here to be that March 17th data point and the rest of our data set. And now we can see a significant portion of our sales are coming in as online. Great. So we just created 2 pie charts in less than like 5 minutes. That's really, really fast. Okay, the last visualization that we need to create is that relative text. That is that text that will change whenever we select something on our line chart. So this one is a bit more involved. So up until now, if you're kind of very familiar with Tableau and you're familiar with everything I've done, this is something for you. This is something that is a little more challenging to do within Tableau. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to create a calculated field. I'm going to name it relative text. And I'm going to go to my draw.io diagram here that I created, and I'm going to insert the text that I'd planned for. So I'm going to insert this text that I've planned for. I'm going to add a space in between it for now. And what we have to do now is we need to replace these XXX's with fields. So the field here for sales is just sales. So I'm going to take sales, I'll drag it into my calculated field. Then I'm going to take the XXS for profit, and I'm going to replace that with the profit measure on the left here. I'm going to drag it onto my calculated field. And then the dates that we're going to use are just 2 order dates. So the first one, I'm going to add an order date. Then I'll also add another order date right here. All right. So with these calculated fields, the first thing we have to do is decide the aggregation level that we're going to show sales at. So the aggregation level we're going to show sales at is the sum of sales. So I type sum and I add brackets around my sales dimension. You'll notice the sales is actually coming up as blue. This is a function that's going to aggregate our data. If you ever want to know more about these functions, there's a little triangle here on the side of our box. We can click on that. We can actually get all the definitions and all the possible functions that we can use. I can take sum, I can type it in, and then I get a nice definition of what this sum is actually going to return. And it's a great way to familiarize yourself with all the functions in Tableau. So I'm going to sum my sales. I'm also going to sum my profit. The order date that we're going to use is going to be a minimum order date. So this is the first order date that is available within my data set. So minimum order date, and then I'm going to do a max function for max order date. All right, perfect. Now let's see what happens if we were to put brackets around this whole calculated field. So we put brackets around the whole field, we click OK. Now I'm going to bring this into our text worksheet, and we'll see here what we have here is the literal text that we just wrote within that calculated field. So what we need actually to do is we need actually for Tableau to calculate this sum of sales and then transfer it into text. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It's a bit more involved, and if you're new to Tableau and you can't really keep up, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You're not meant to, but some people might get something out of this as well. So I'm going to wrap this sales with a rounding function. The round function is going to be rounded to the nearest integer. I'm also going to wrap this sum of profit to the nearest integer as well. Next, I'm going to transfer this function into a string, also known as a text object. So let's do string str. I'm going to wrap this. And we're going to wrap this with a string as well. And finally, we're going to wrap our dates with strings. Okay, so now that everything is a string, we can take a look if Tableau is going to let us use this as a calculated field. And no, we have a little error message at the bottom here. So this is something that I really like about Tableau is you get these error messages whenever your calculated field is not working. So syntax error, maybe you are missing an operator. Okay, that's a little vague. Basically, what we have to do is we need to make this text here be equal to a string. To make it equal to a string, we saw before, we're just going to add brackets next to our data for all of our strings. Okay, so finally, we are still missing an operator. So what we need to do is actually plus these strings that we just created. We're going to plus them together. To add all the strings together. And whenever you add strings together in Tableau, it basically just creates a sentence. I can bring that up. All right, so now that we've added pluses to all of our strings, Tableau is now telling us this calculation is valid. And so when we press OK, we can now click on our relative text and bring it into text. and we have this displaying, okay? So there was $1.6 million in sales and 100,090 profit between January 2nd and today. Okay, so with that, what we can do is we can work a little formatting magic to actually make that increase a little bit. And what we'll be left with when we increase the size of this is a nice message that is now relative to the sales and the profit of our data. Okay, so that one's a little bit more involved, I know, but a necessary evil for our dashboard. Okay, so now we've created all of our visualizations. We're now able to start our dashboard. So this dashboard, I'm gonna name it Sales Dashboard. And the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the size of my dashboard. So this is a custom size that I have in this dashboard. We'll see it's actually quite large as to be identical to the one I showed you guys. So if I was to add this here, I can show you how big it is. It starts from here, then we can take the whole scroll all the way down to the bottom. So if you ever want to set the size of your dashboard, you're able to do that. Right now, this is a custom size that I have for pixels, but you can also choose from a bunch of different options here that might be a screen size that is very common within your organization. Now, I would encourage you to seek out the screen sizes, maybe talk to someone who knows about pixel sizes and choose accordingly. Okay, so with this dashboard, what we're going to do first is we're going to insert a container. If we look back at our draw.io skeleton, we have to add this first container into our dashboard. So to do that, it's pretty easy enough. At the bottom here, we have a bunch of different objects. The horizontal and vertical objects are called containers. So I'm going to add a vertical container to my dashboard here. And then with what I can do with that vertical container is I can actually add a background to it so we can keep track of what this actually looks like. So I'm going to make this a blue background. And within this container now, I'm actually going to add a title. So a title is just going to use the text object within Tableau. I'm going to add it here. The title we're going to use, if I go back to my draw.io, is right here. Click OK. And now we have our title showing up here. Okay. Under our title, we're now going to add another text box that is going to be the context of our dashboard. We're not going to worry about formatting just yet. And then the last part that we want to add is that relative text visualization that we just created. So that relative text is under the sheets part of my dashboard. I'm going to take relative text. I'm going to add it to the bottom here. Now we can see we had that amount of sales and profit between those dates. Okay, so that concludes our first container. Now, if we want to add another container that's going to have our line chart, we can do that by grabbing a vertical object, clicking on our dashboard, and then we can also add a background to this object so we can see exactly what is going on here. So let's make it the more of an orangey color. Within this container, in my plan, I have a blank Tableau object. So a blank Tableau object basically just takes up space, but has nothing inside of it. So I added that blank object to my container. And now what I can do is take a look at this blank container. I can add a nice little border to it. Let me make sure I'm actually changing it on my blank container. Perfect. So I have a border for my blank container, and now I can add my line chart. So I'm going to add my line chart to the bottom of my container here, my line chart, and then finally I'm going to sandwich it with another blank container. Perfect. So we have a blank container here in orange. We have our line chart, and then we have our final blank container at the bottom here that I'm going to add a border to, so we have a reference. Awesome. So that will conclude this part of our plan. Now we want to add the final part of our plan, which is a container that has that in-store title, the online, and the pie charts. So to do that, I'm going to add one last vertical container to my dashboard. I'm going to add it to the bottom. And just going to make sure this is actually coming in properly. There we go. And for this container, I'm going to change the background to be black. Perfect. Okay, so we have our containers in place. Now it's time, we're going to look at how I actually created those titles and how I made them look so good in Tableau. Well, there's no real secret sauce here. I'd imagine if you have any design background or you have a designer in-house in your company, you could ask them to do this. But for me, how I created those backgrounds is I actually Googled PNG Title Creator. And the first link that you'll get is a transparent text generator. Okay, so this text generator is really, really great because it's super easy to generate the text. The first thing that we're going to generate through this is going to be the in-store title. So I'm going to type my title as in-store. The HTML style I'm going to use. So HTML is the language that we will see on the internet quite a bit. If you're not familiar with this, basically this is a color code that you can add to your text. So the color code, if we Google Tableau color palette and we go down to the first GitHub link here, there's a Tableau color palette that is defaulted to Tableau. This is the one that I like to use for my titles. I'm going to insert this code into my previous text generator. So I'll insert that code. And then lastly, I'm going to change the font to Arbeca. When I click on generate here, you'll now see that title that we saw at the start of our demo. Here's the title that appears. You can now save this as a PNG image. In my case, I already have it saved, so I'll save it again, in-store title, and there it goes. It saves, replace it, yeah, sure, why not? And then so on and so forth. So with this, we can continue to do this for in-store, online, and versus, and I'll just show you guys what these actually look like. I created a versus, which is all in white, so of course you can't see anything. And then finally, there is an online option that I created that just looks like that. Okay, so we can actually bring these into Tableau by the method of a image. So if I go to my dashboard, another object I can use is an image. So I'm going to take this image and I'm going to bring it into my container, and I'm going to choose the first title that I'd like to show, and that is in store. So go to my retail, we'll go to in store, click OK. Now we have that in store showing up. I'm also going to add the image of the verses. So take verses. And then finally, we're going to add the image for our online. Now we have online. I'm just going to center that. And there we go. We have our title showing up. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add those pie charts. So those pie charts are within their own container. So if I take a horizontal container and I bring it to the bottom here, I can then add my pie charts to this container, no problem. And let's see, I think they're hidden. Here we go. We have the pie chart for before and then the pie chart for after. I'll just move this one to the side here. Perfect, so now we have our pie chart, we have our titles, we have our online, our versus online. And now we have basically the skeleton of our report. All we have to do is add a bit of formatting and a bit of functionality. So I'm gonna remove these legends here. I don't really need them, I don't want them, so I'll remove them real quick. And then we're gonna talk about how to format this from top to bottom. So the title that we're gonna do, we want this to be a center, and we also want the text to be white, so that's no problem. We can add white text to this as well. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower it a little bit so I can make our letters a little bigger, make it a 36. Can lower it here. And then I'm going to add some padding. So padding, if you haven't heard of it, it's basically going to compress our text a little bit to make things look a bit spaced out better. So I'm going to add 20 outer padding and 20 inner padding to this text object. It's going to make it come in a little bit. And then I'm going to remove from our container here, I'm going to remove this background for now. And instead, I'm going to add a background to my specific container. So here we go. That's how we get that nice looking title that has white text with a blue background, and then we have our padding in between. Okay, with this one, we're going to do something similar. Again, we're going to add that 20 padding to the inner and outings of this, but instead of making the text white, we're going to add a blue border to this one. I'm going to lower it a little bit so people can see all the text. We're going to increase the size of our letters here to be 14s. And then we're going to increase this sentence in particular to be 16 and underlined and bold. All right, gonna bring this down. Perfect. Okay, we can remove this title. And now we have our first container formatted as soon as I add a border to this one. We have our first container formatted, and also I can add padding. Perfect, so that looks really nice for our top part of our dashboard. Now let's format this orange part. I'm going to get rid of the borders on my blank spaces here. I'm going to remove the line chart, and then I'm going to remove the background of my container. So we have our line chart. Next, we can format our bottom container here. So this bottom container is good in black, but we actually have a sub container within this container that I'm going to change the background to be orange.